Let's go to Beijing and speak to Gong, a professor at the University of International Business and Economics. John, thank you so much indeed. Let's see, I wanted to start with, that's it. I remember now what I wanted to ask you. Why are people having fewer children? Is it that children are too expensive?
Well, I think Vietnam is following the footstep of practically every developed country, and you see these much lower birth rates in the developing world, starting with the Scandinavian countries in Europe, and now this has spread to developed countries in Asia, particularly in Northeast Asia, in South Korea, in Japan, and now in China. And I think as the economy further develops, as the living standard keeps going up, Vietnam is doing pretty much the same thing. People just don't want to have more children anymore. I think partly because it's getting more and more costly to raise kids. On the other hand, I think the idea of relying on kids for retirement, which is sort of the agricultural society's tradition, is gradually going away. So I think this is a very natural phenomenon. China has already abolished its birth control policy many years ago, and I would expect that Vietnam exactly doing the same thing. Now, today, it's doing exactly this, what is expected of Vietnam is going to do.
Absolutely. I think it was about 10 years ago, John, that I read for European countries, only 2 of them have a birth rate that will sustain their current levels of population, and those were Ireland and Portugal. So you're quite right. It's a global issue. Give us an economics 101, very simple, about why low birth rates can affect a country's economy.
Well, it affects the economy from 2 perspectives. One, of course, it affects the labor supply. For countries like Japan, South Korea, there's a shortage of labor. On the other hand, I think it's probably a more severe problem is the lack of aggregate demand. I think the shortage of labor can be mitigated by the rapid development in the application of robotics, artificial intelligence, but the lack of aggregate demand is mostly a problem. The society gets more aged as the birth rate drops, like what we are seeing in Japan. And elderly people, simply don't shop much. I mean, you go to shopping malls in Tokyo, for example, you see these elderly couples walking around, typically with their hands empty, doesn't have a shopping bag in their hand. And also want to point out one thing which makes a big difference here. Usually in a more of a religious society, I think this problem is less severe. You mentioned Portugal. It's practically a Catholic country. The United States is a very so-called a nation of faith. People are very religious. That's why the United States still have a very decent birth rate. I think in East Asia, particularly in East Asian countries, religion doesn't play very much a large role in society, and this problem is particularly more pronounced than other sort of more religious countries.
John, how has China managed to increase its birth rate? Is it doing what other countries are doing and giving tax breaks and financial incentives to people who have more than 2 babies?
Right now, not as much. I've seen sort of policies coming from local governments in some cities, in some townships, but not so much from a national policy perspective from the central government. But I think there's ample discussions, debates in the relevant community here, policy community here in China, talking about potentially rolling out these policies, particularly in the housing sector. But so far, we understand that the cost of doing this is very high, as we have seen in some of the Scandinavian countries, in Russia. So I think in China, be very careful about rolling out a policy like this. I think China can still afford to wait for a few more years before rolling out policies like this. But nevertheless, I think definitely the country is moving towards that direction.
Yeah, it looks like Japan's going to have to make some kind of decision about how to increase its birth rate. John, really interesting. Thanks so much.